For over a century, thousands have searched the burning deserts of Arizona, chasing whispers of a treasure so vast it could change a man's life forever. Yet most who dared to find it never returned. What is the truth behind the lost Dutchman's gold mine? Is it real or America's deadliest legend? Welcome to a world of mystery, greed, and ghostly legends, where the line between fact and folklore fades beneath the blazing Arizona sun. In this episode, we'll uncover the chilling truth behind the lost Dutchman-esque gold mine, the fabled treasure said to be buried deep within the Superstition Mountains. For over a century, explorers, historians, and fortune hunters have risked everything searching for it. But what makes this story so haunting isn't just the gold. It's the curse that seems to follow those who dare to find it. In the heart of the Arizona desert, beneath the burning sun and endless horizon, there lived a man whose name would one day ignite one of the greatest treasure legends in American history. Jacob Waltz, the so-called Dutchman, yet Jacob Waltz was not Dutch at all. He was a German immigrant who came to America chasing the promise of fortune like so many others in the 1800s. But unlike the thousands who toiled and died poor in the rugged West, Waltz's story was different, mysterious, dark, and wrapped in gold dust and death. The story begins in the mid-1800s when Jacob Waltz arrived in the Arizona Territory, then a wild, lawless land filled with gold, fever, and ghost towns. He was quiet, solitary, a man who kept to himself. Locals knew him as a hard-working prospector, but there was something strange about him. He never seemed to work a steady claim, yet somehow he always had gold. Not the kind of gold you panned from rivers, but thick, pure gold. Gold that seemed to come from a hidden source. People began to whisper. Some said he had discovered a secret mine in the Superstition Mountains, a treacherous range east of Phoenix known for strange disappearances and ancient Apache legends. Others claimed he had found an old Spanish gold vein, a remnant of lost Jesuit mines hidden long before the United States even existed. But Waltz never confirmed anything. He'd just smile, a glint of gold dust sometimes still on his hands, and disappear into the desert for weeks, returning with small sacks of incredible or the kind that could make a poor man rich overnight. No one knew where he went. The Superstition Mountains were vast and merciless. Jagged cliffs, searing heat, and shifting sands concealed everything and revealed nothing. Many who followed him tried to trace his route, but all failed. Waltz guarded his secret like his life depended on it, and maybe it did. According to the legends, Waltz's gold was unlike anything ever found in Arizona. The ore was rich, nearly pure, and unlike the typical deposits found in the region. Some samples he sold contained almost 50 ounces of gold per ton, a staggering amount. To prospectors and geologists alike, this didn't make sense. Arizona had gold, yes, but nothing like what Waltz possessed. That mystery only deepened the myth. But who was Jacob Waltz before he became the lost Dutchman? Records show he was born around 1810 in Württemberg, Germany. He immigrated to the U.S. sometime in the 1840s, working odd jobs and prospecting in California before making his way to Arizona. He was no fool. He understood the dangers of the desert and the greed of men. He lived modestly in a small home near Phoenix, with few friends and fewer words. Yet, every so often, he would appear with fresh gold, the kind that glittered too brightly to ignore. Rumors swirled endlessly. Some said he'd stolen the gold from an old Mexican mine. Others believed he'd killed to keep its location secret. There was even talk that he had found the treasure of the Peralta family, Spanish miners massacred by the Apache centuries earlier, their mine lost in blood and sand. The Apache themselves spoke of sacred ground deep within the mountains, where spirits guarded ancient riches and where any intruder would meet a terrible fate. Waltz, somehow, had gone there and lived to tell the tale. But Jacob Waltz never told the tale. He hinted, dropped vague remarks after a drink or two, and left behind fragments of clues. He mentioned landmarks, a pointed peak, a hidden canyon, a cave near a stone shaped like a man's face. But every story was slightly different. It was as if Waltz enjoyed watching men chase the shadow of a dream. By the 1880s, he had become something of a ghost himself. Locals occasionally saw him traveling toward the superstitions with a single burro and a few supplies. Sometimes he'd return limping, sunburned, and silent. Other times he'd vanish for months. But when he came back, there was always gold. Always enough to survive, but never enough to draw too much attention. It was as if he was guarding the mine, taking only what he needed and leaving the rest hidden forever. Neighbors grew curious. One of them, a woman named Julia Thomas, a baker in Phoenix, would later play a major role in the legend. She often helped Waltz when he was sick or lonely, and he trusted her more than most. She saw glimpses of the gold he kept, pieces of raw, gleaming or wrapped in cloth, hidden in jars or under floorboards. It wasn't until much later that she realized how close she had been to the secret of a lifetime. As Waltz grew old, the secret began to weigh on him. He knew his time was running out. Decades in the desert had worn his body down, but his mind remained sharp enough to know that the treasure he'd found could either be his legacy or his curse. He had spent his life keeping it hidden, and he seemed almost haunted by it, as though he feared what would happen if others found it. The truth about Jacob Waltz is that no one truly knew him. He was a man made of contradictions, a recluse who held one of the greatest secrets of the American frontier. Some called him lucky, others called him cursed. But one thing was certain: he had gold, and it came from somewhere deep in those mountains. Somewhere that no one else could find, no matter how hard they searched. And as the legend spread, the line between man and myth began to blur. Jacob Waltz, the Dutchman who wasn't Dutch, would soon leave behind more than just a name. He would leave behind a map of madness, greed, and death that would claim lives for over a century. Because whatever secret he discovered in the heart of the Superstition Mountains, he took it with him to his grave, leaving behind only whispers of a treasure that might still be waiting, somewhere in the burning sands of Arizona. By the time Jacob Waltz lay on his deathbed in the year 1891, the once rugged prospector was a frail shadow of the man who had wandered the blazing deserts of Arizona in search of gold. His small home, a modest adobe house near the Salt River in Phoenix, was quiet except for the sound of labored breathing. The man who had carried one of America's greatest secrets was slipping away, but not before leaving behind a riddle that would ignite a century of obsession. Sitting beside him was a woman named Julia Thomas, a kind-hearted baker who had taken care of the old man in his final days. What she didn't know was that she was about to become part of one of the greatest mysteries in Western history. Julia Thomas had always thought of Waltz as a strange but gentle man. He lived simply, sold small amounts of gold from time to time, and rarely spoke of his past. But in those last days, as fever and age weakened him, Waltz began to talk. His words were fragmented, mumbled, sometimes feverish, but Julia sensed they were important. He spoke of the mine, of landmarks hidden deep in the Superstition Mountains, of canyons shaped like faces and stones that marked the way. He spoke of gold so pure it shone like the sun, buried in a place few dared to go. According to Julia's later recollections, Waltz told her that the mine was located in the Superstitions, somewhere beyond a prominent peak that could be seen from Phoenix. He described cliffs, a dry creek bed, and a cave that could only be reached by following a narrow trail past a hidden spring. He said the entrance was concealed by brush and that anyone who went there uninvited would never return. His voice grew weaker as he described the path, giving vague directions, pausing to cough or drink water. Julia leaned closer, trying to capture every word, realizing that she was listening to the dying confession of a man who had carried a secret treasure in his heart for decades. Waltz was delirious at times, drifting in and out of consciousness. He repeated phrases, whispered about danger, the curse, and the Apache spirits that guarded the mountains. Julia, though frightened, was fascinated. She knew this was not just a tale of gold. It was a story of obsession and mystery that could change her life forever. Some versions of the legend say Waltz even gave her a crude hand-drawn map, sketched shakily on a piece of paper, showing mountains, a river, and a few cryptic symbols. Others say he only gave verbal clues, landmarks that were impossible to verify once he passed. There was one final piece to his confession that Julia would never forget. Waltz allegedly pointed to a candle by his bedside and said, "Under that candle, you'll find proof." When he passed away, Julia lifted the candle and found, hidden beneath the floor, A box filled with raw gold or thick gleaming chunks unlike anything she had ever seen. It was the kind of gold miners spent their lives dreaming of. To Julia, it was undeniable proof that Waltz's story was real. They prepared carefully, gathering supplies, maps, and the courage to face the unforgiving desert. The mountains loomed ahead of them like ancient guardians, their rugged peaks shimmering in the heat. Every ridge looked familiar and unfamiliar at once, as though the land itself was playing tricks on them. Days turned into weeks as Julia and her companions scoured the desert. They followed dry washes, climbed cliffs, and searched caves, believing at every turn they were getting closer. Yet the further they went, the more the desert seemed to swallow them whole. The Arizona sun was merciless, the terrain confusing and treacherous. They found fragments of clues, stones arranged oddly, old mine shafts long abandoned, bits of quartz glittering in the sand, but no gold. Julia began to realize how fragile Waltz's directions were. His words, spoken through pain and fever, were like pieces of a shattered puzzle. Was the canyon he mentioned the one before them or another further east? Was the Needle Rock the same formation they'd passed earlier or one still hidden beyond the horizon? The more she searched, the more she began to understand the madness that had claimed so many treasure hunters before and after her. By the time they returned to Phoenix, they were exhausted, sunburned, and defeated. They had found nothing. Yet Julia couldn't let it go. She published stories in local newspapers, telling the tale of Jacob Waltz and his mysterious mine, hoping someone might help her piece the puzzle together. Her story captured imaginations instantly. Miners, adventurers, and fortune seekers flooded into the Superstition Mountains, each convinced they would succeed where Julia had failed. But few ever came back. What makes this deathbed confession so haunting is how little it actually revealed. Waltz gave just enough to inspire a century of searching, but not enough for anyone to find the truth. Some say he deliberately misled Julia to protect the mine. Others claim she misunderstood his words, that the fever made him ramble nonsense that sounded like riddles. But the box of gold she found, that was real. His deathbed confession became a map not just to a hidden mine but to one of the most enduring legends in American history, a riddle buried in the desert where truth and myth continue to blur beneath the unforgiving. Arizona sun, the Superstition Mountains, a jagged fortress of stone and shadow rising out of the Arizona desert, have always carried an air of mystery. Their very name warns of danger, of things beyond reason, of powers unseen. Long before Jacob Waltz ever set foot there, the Apache people spoke of these mountains as sacred ground, a place where the spirits of their ancestors dwelled. To them, it wasn't merely rock and dust. It was a living, breathing entity that demanded respect. They called it the home of the Thunder God, a place of both creation and destruction. Legends whispered that deep inside the mountains lay a portal to the underworld, and that those who disturbed it would never return. When early settlers and miners began venturing into the area, they didn't listen to those warnings. To them, the superstitions were simply another barrier between them and gold. But soon, strange things began to happen. Entire expeditions vanished without a trace. Camps were found abandoned, supplies still neatly stacked, but no sign of the men who had used them. Skeptics claimed it was the desert's merciless nature, dehydration, heat stroke, wild animals. But others whispered of darker forces, of a curse that guarded the treasure said to be hidden there. Even today, those who hike deep into the range describe an unsettling feeling, as if they are being watched. Compasses malfunction, radios go silent, shadows move where no one stands. For generations, locals have reported flickering lights at night, strange orbs floating between the cliffs, and echoes of voices carried on the wind. To some, these are just tricks of heat and imagination, but to others they are the restless spirits of those who sought the lost Dutchman-esque gold and paid the ultimate price. The Apache legends are filled with warnings that seem eerily connected to what would happen centuries later. One story tells of the Peralta family, Spanish miners who supposedly discovered a rich vein of gold in the Superstitions long before the Dutchman. They mined it in secret, hauling out tons of gold back to Mexico, but their greed did not go unnoticed. The Apache, furious that their sacred ground had been violated, ambushed the miners in what would later be called the Peralta Massacre. Dozens of men were killed, their bodies left to rot in the desert sun. Their gold, along with the mine's exact location, vanished. When settlers later found skeletons and broken wagons scattered across the desert, the legend grew. People said the Apache placed a curse upon the land, ensuring that no outsider would ever profit from its riches again. Years later, when Jacob Waltz began bringing out his mysterious gold, many locals connected his fortune to the Peralta story. Some believed he had stumbled upon their lost mine. Others said he had robbed the dead. Either way, they claimed he had taken what was never meant to be his, and the curse would one day reclaim him. The pattern of tragedy around the Superstition Mountains only seemed to confirm that belief. Throughout the late 1800s and early 1900s, men who went searching for the lost Dutchman's mine often met grim fates. In 1910, a treasure hunter named Adolf Ruth set out with a hand-drawn map said to be from the Peralta descendants. Weeks later, his body was found decapitated, his skull discovered miles from the rest of his remains. Nearby lay his notebook with a chilling final entry, about 200 feet across from cave. His death was ruled accidental by authorities, but locals weren't convinced. Some said he had been murdered by someone else hunting the treasure. Others swore it was the curse, claiming Ruth had trespassed where he shouldn't have. Stories like Ruth's only fueled the mountain's dark reputation. Search parties that went after missing men often turned up more bones than answers. Horses were found wandering without riders, camps destroyed by unknown hands, and footprints that vanished abruptly into the sand. Even experienced trackers refused to go too deep, muttering about the whispers they heard after sunset. They said the mountains could trick you, that trails change shape. Canyons seemed to move, and the landscape itself could confuse even the most seasoned explorer. By the mid-20th century, the Superstitions had gained a new name, the most haunted mountains in America. Television crews, geologists, and historians all came to investigate. Some dismissed the legends as superstition, a fitting irony given the name, while others left convinced that something beyond explanation lingered there. Geologists noted odd magnetic fields and geological anomalies that could explain the malfunctioning compasses. But that didn't explain the eerie sensations or the countless disappearances that continued to occur. Even park rangers, hardened by years in the wild, tell stories of strange encounters. Campfires suddenly extinguished by unseen hands. Footsteps circling their tents in the dead of night. Whispers carried through the wind when no one else was around. Some believe the lost souls of treasure hunters still roam the desert, searching endlessly for the gold that cost them their lives. Others think the curse is more psychological, that greed itself drives men mad in these mountains, turning them against each other until the desert claims what's left. And then there are the lights, floating orbs that glow faintly at dusk, sometimes white, sometimes red, drifting silently across the cliffs. Scientists call them Earth lights or plasma discharges, but locals know them by another name, the eyes of the dead. According to legend, they appear whenever someone gets too close to the mine, as if warning them to turn back. What makes the Superstition Mountains so powerful as a legend isn't just the idea of hidden gold. It's the feeling that the land itself is alive. The Apache believed these mountains could choose who lived and who died within them. To this day, many treasure hunters enter with respect, offering tobacco or a quiet prayer before they begin their search. Because whether you believe in curses or not, history has shown that the superstitions don't forgive easily. The air feels heavy there, as if burdened by secrets older than the country itself. Secrets that have swallowed men whole and left behind only bones and rumors in the sand. Over the decades that followed Jacob Waltz's death, the Superstition Mountains became a magnet for dreamers, adventurers, and desperate men chasing a whisper of gold. It seemed that every generation produced new treasure hunters who believed they would be the one to solve the mystery that had eluded everyone else. Yet, time and time again, those who ventured too deep into the mountains never returned. Some were found years later, their skeletons bleached by the sun. Others were never found at all. The lost Dutchman mine wasn't just a legend anymore. It was a lure that claimed lives, a promise that turned ordinary men into ghosts. One of the earliest and most haunting cases came in the 1890s, only a few years after Waltz's death. Two prospectors were found dead near the edge of the Superstitions, their bodies mutilated, their camp ransacked. Locals believed they had stumbled upon the mine and been killed for it, but by whom, no one knew. Some pointed to rival prospectors. Others said the Apache curse had struck again. The story spread quickly, and soon the mountains had a reputation for swallowing men whole. By 1910, the legend had gained national attention with the mysterious disappearance of Adolph Ruth. A 66-year-old prospector from Washington, D.C., Ruth had obtained a map that he claimed traced back to the Peralta family, the same Spanish miners supposedly massacred by the Apache centuries earlier. Determined to find the treasure, he ignored every warning from locals and ventured into the desert alone. Weeks passed with no sign of him. Searchers scoured the area, but what they eventually found chilled them to the bone. Ruth's skull was discovered in a ravine, pierced by a bullet hole. His body, found months later miles away, was decomposed beyond recognition. Among his belongings was a notebook with a final cryptic line scrawled inside, about 200 feet across from the cave. The authorities claimed it was a case of heat exhaustion and wild animals, but few believed that the bullet hole was too precise, too deliberate. Some whispered that Ruth had found the mine and someone had killed him to keep its location secret. Theories ranged from rival treasure hunters to hidden guardians of the gold itself. But whatever the truth, Ruth's fate became a warning that echoed through time. Those who search for the Dutchman's gold often die trying. More would follow. In the 1930s, prospector James A. Cravey went into the Superstitions with a burro and high hopes. He told friends he was certain he'd found a clue Waltz had left behind and that this time the mine would be his. When he didn't return, a search party found his headless body near a remote canyon. His decapitation mirrored Ruth's, fueling talk of a curse. Some said he was murdered for his map. Others believed the mountains themselves took him. Then came the story of the Jenkins brothers in the 1940s, experienced outdoorsmen. They entered the mountains claiming they had located a cave that matched Waltz's description, a hidden entrance near a dry wash marked by an oddly shaped rock. They never came out. Their supplies were found abandoned, but there were no signs of a struggle. Searchers scoured the area for months but found nothing. It was as if the desert had simply erased them. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, new names joined the growing list of the lost. In 1959, a man named Charles M. Massey vanished while searching for the mine. His car was found parked neatly at the trailhead, keys still in the ignition, but there was no trace of him anywhere. Rangers and volunteers combed the terrain, helicopters scanned from above, but Massey was gone, another soul claimed by the Superstition. These were not reckless wanderers. Many of them were seasoned explorers, veterans, scientists, and military men with survival training. Yet even they fell victim to the same pattern, disappearing without explanation in one of the most well-mapped regions of the desert. Something about the Superstitions seemed to defy logic. Maps failed to match the terrain, familiar trails shifted, and compasses spun without reason. Some survivors of near-death experiences in the area reported losing all sense of direction, as if the land itself was playing tricks on them. And it wasn't just men who vanished. Entire expeditions went missing. In 1961, a group of 3 men from California came armed with modern equipment, metal detectors, maps, and climbing gear. They had spent months studying the Dutchman's clues, convinced they knew where the mine was hidden. When their families didn't hear from them, a search party was launched. Weeks later, rescuers found their camp destroyed and their gear scattered. There were no bodies, no footprints leading away, just silence and sand. The official report called it an accident, but locals knew better. Every death, every disappearance, every scrap of evidence only deepened the myth. Newspapers called the Superstition Mountains the Devil's Playground, a place where gold and death walked hand in hand. Yet, despite the warnings, people kept coming. The promise of gold, the thrill of discovery, the idea that they could succeed where others had failed, it was irresistible. Even into the modern era, the pattern has continued. Experienced hikers, weekend adventurers, and professional treasure hunters still vanish every few years, their remains discovered months later in impossible places. Some are found sitting upright, as if they simply fell asleep. Others are discovered miles from where they were last seen, with no explanation of how they traveled so far through unforgiving terrain. The desert keeps its secrets well. The most unsettling part of all this isn't just the number of deaths, but the consistency of the stories. Many of the victims were found near landmarks described in Waltz's clues: narrow canyons, stone faces, hidden springs. It's as if they all got close. Too close. Close enough to glimpse something real, something they weren't meant to find. And every time the Superstition Mountains took them back, sealing the mystery tighter with each life lost, feeding the legend that the lost Dutchman's gold mine is more than just a treasure. It's a trap waiting for the next soul, brave enough or foolish enough to search for it. The mystery of the lost Dutchman's gold mine has never been about a single story. It's a labyrinth of clues, maps, and conflicting tales that twist together like the canyons of the Superstition Mountains themselves. Every generation has tried to piece the puzzle together, chasing fragments of truth left behind by Jacob Waltz and the countless others who followed him. Yet every clue seems to lead not to answers, but to more questions, as if the mountain itself is mocking those who try to decode it. The most famous of all the supposed are the ones attributed to Waltz himself. Before his death, he allegedly described certain landmarks that would lead to the mine: a hidden canyon, a cave near a formation shaped like a man's face, and a spring that ran dry in summer. Some claim he mentioned a needle-shaped rock that pointed the way when the sun set, and a white rock shaped like a saddle. But when treasure hunters tried to match these descriptions to real features in the Superstition Mountains, they quickly found that there were dozens, maybe hundreds of places that could fit. The desert is full of ridges and rocks that look like faces or needles depending on where you stand. The directions were tantalizing but maddeningly vague, like a riddle designed to never be solved. Then there are the maps, hundreds of them, each claiming to show the true location of the lost Dutchman's mine. Some are hand-drawn copies of what Jacob Waltz supposedly left behind. Others are said to come from the Peralta family, the Spanish miners who worked the area centuries earlier. The most famous of these is the Peralta stone maps, discovered in the 1940s. They are carved into slabs of stone, etched with Spanish markings, crosses, hearts, and arrows, and even include a depiction of a priest and a horse. Many believe these maps point directly to the location of the mine. But here's the catch: no one knows if they're real. Some experts insist they're modern fakes, clever hoaxes created to lure tourists and treasure hunters. Others are convinced they're genuine relics of a forgotten expedition tied to the earliest European miners in Arizona. To this day, no one has proven either side definitively, and so the theories multiplied. Some claim the lost Dutchman's mine wasn't a mine at all, but a cache, a hidden stash of gold stolen from the Peralta family or smuggled out of Mexico during times of war. Others believe the mine was part of a vast network of Spanish tunnels that crisscrossed beneath the desert, filled with riches left behind by missionaries and conquistadors. There are even those who argue that the treasure predates Europeans altogether, suggesting it was an ancient Native American gold source, buried long before the arrival of settlers. But the mystery doesn't end with history. Geology itself adds another twist. Experts who have studied the Superstition Mountains argue that the area's volcanic rock formations make it an unlikely place for large gold veins to exist. The conditions just aren't right for that kind of mineralization. So where did Jacob Waltz's gold come from? The found under his bed after his death was exceptionally rich, far purer than any gold ever found in that region. Some geologists believe he might have found a small pocket, a one-time deposit formed by ancient geological flukes, and that once he exhausted it, there was nothing left. Others suspect he brought the gold from somewhere else entirely and invented the story of a hidden mine to conceal his true source. Still, people can't ignore the uncanny coincidences. the landmarks that match Waltz's clues, the geological oddities, the strange formations that seem to align perfectly with the maps. Every clue feels too close to dismiss, yet never close enough to confirm. Many searchers have reported finding old mine shafts sealed with stone, mysterious symbols carved into rocks, or traces of campsites far older than any modern explorer. Each discovery adds another piece to the puzzle, but never completes the picture. In the 20th century, as technology advanced, treasure hunters brought in metal detectors, sonar equipment, and even ground-penetrating radar. But the Superstition Mountains resisted them all. The rough terrain, the magnetic disturbances, and the maze-like valleys made accurate readings nearly impossible. Some teams thought they found something, faint signatures of tunnels or hidden chambers, but when they tried to dig, they found nothing but rock. Others claimed their equipment malfunctioned, their batteries drained mysteriously, their GPS systems scrambled beyond explanation. For some, it only reinforced the belief that the mountains were alive in some way, protecting whatever lay hidden inside. And then there are the clues that come not from the earth but from the people who lived around it. Locals tell stories of an old prospector in the early 1900s who stumbled out of the mountains half dead, clutching a pouch of rich gold, or he claimed he had found the mine but couldn't find his way back. When asked to retrace his steps, he refused, terrified, saying that something was in those mountains that didn't want to be found. He died shortly after, and his gold disappeared with him. Some modern theorists believe the answer lies in combining old maps and modern satellite imagery. They've overlaid the Peralta maps with Google Earth, aligning the landmarks described in the clues, Weaver's Needle, Bluff Spring, and Needle Canyon, and found shocking correlations. Certain shadows at sunset seem to match the ancient markings almost perfectly. But even with this technology, no one has found definitive proof. Every time someone claims to be close, they either vanish, give up, or go silent. The mystery of the clues, maps, and theories surrounding the lost Dutchman's gold mine is a perfect storm of fact, fiction, and obsession. Every rock formation, every cave, every legend seems to point to something real, something buried beneath centuries of dust and deceit. But like a mirage in the desert, the closer you get, the further it slips away. Perhaps that's what keeps the legend alive. Because for those who dare to search, it's not just about gold anymore. It's about outsmarting the riddle that has haunted America's imagination for more than 100 years, a riddle that still dares anyone to solve it. In the modern age, the legend of the lost Dutchman's gold mine refuses to fade. Instead, it has evolved, fueled by technology, adventure shows, and the endless allure of striking it rich. The dusty trails once traveled by horseback are now crossed by drones and satellite mapping systems. Treasure hunters no longer rely on hand-drawn maps or whispered clues. They use LiDAR scans, GPS coordinates, and 3D modeling to uncover what Jacob Waltz took to his grave. And yet, even with all the advancements of the 21st century, the mine remains hidden, as if the desert itself still guards it with an unseen hand. Every year, hundreds of modern explorers descend upon the Superstition Mountains with metal detectors strapped to their backs and tablets filled with digital maps. Online forums and YouTube channels have turned the search into a community of believers, skeptics, and storytellers. They trade theories, satellite images, and new interpretations of Waltz's clues, believing that technology will finally do what man never could. But the deeper they dig, both literally and figuratively, the more the legend seems to twist around them. Because the lost Dutchman's mine isn't just a physical mystery anymore, it's a psychological one. Among the new generation of seekers are scientists and geologists who have tried to cut through the folklore using hard data. Geochemical analysis of soil samples across the superstitions has revealed traces of gold in small concentrations, enough to suggest the presence of veins, but not enough to match the purity of Waltz's ore. Remote sensing and spectral imaging have identified underground anomalies, voids, and mineral concentrations that could be old mine shafts or natural caverns. Teams have mapped these points meticulously, convinced that one of them must hold the secret. But the mountains resist. Rock slides, heat waves, and equipment failures plague every expedition. Batteries drain unexpectedly, drones lose signal, and electronic sensors go dead as soon as they pass certain ridgelines. Even technology seems to falter in the Superstition Mountains, just as compasses did more than a century ago. Some modern explorers have turned to historical archives, hoping the answers lie not in the earth but in the past. Digital scans of 19th century mining records, Spanish documents, and handwritten diaries are being analyzed using AI algorithms, searching for patterns or overlooked coordinates. A few claim to have found references to lost Jesuit mines and Peralta family shipments of gold or that match Waltz samples. Others believe that by layering these old maps over modern satellite imagery, they can triangulate the mine's position. But as always, the patterns lead to conflicting points. The data never quite lines up. It's as if the mine keeps shifting, staying one step ahead of anyone who tries to define it. In 2013, a team of explorers used high-resolution aerial mapping and ground-penetrating radar to scan the area near Weaver's Needle, one of the most iconic landmarks tied to the legend. They detected what appeared to be a hidden shaft deep beneath the rock, a straight tunnel that didn't match any natural formation. The discovery made headlines. But when a follow-up expedition tried to dig down, the tunnel collapsed, leaving behind no trace of what had been found. The area was sealed off by park authorities for safety reasons, and the team's footage mysteriously disappeared from public release. Some say it was destroyed, others whisper it was confiscated. For every rational explanation, there's another that delves into the supernatural. Some modern treasure hunters claim to have experienced the same eerie phenomena described by those who came before them. Sudden cold winds, unexplained voices, shadows moving across the rocks. A few have captured strange glowing lights on their cameras, floating near cave entrances or darting between cliffs. Scientists call it ball lightning or reflected light from nearby towns. But for those who've seen it up close, it feels like something else. A warning. The same ancient curse the Apache spoke of. Television documentaries and online investigators continue to bring new attention to the mystery. Each time a new theory arises, it reignites the fever. One popular claim suggests the mine was destroyed intentionally, either by the Apache to protect their sacred ground or by Waltz himself before his death to ensure no one else could find it. Another theory points to old Spanish mission records that reference hidden gold near the Needles, possibly alluding to Weaver's Needle and the surrounding canyons. With every clue, new searchers set out, convinced they are on the edge of discovery. Yet the mountains remain unchanged, watching silently as generation after generation chases the same mirage. Even government agencies have been drawn into the mystery. The U.S. Geological Survey has conducted multiple studies of the Superstition area, and while none officially mention the mine, their findings on mineral density and underground voids only deepen speculation. There are restricted zones, places marked off-limits due to instability or environmental protection, that some believe are really hiding access points. The whispers of cover-ups and classified finds circulate through online forums, each story adding another layer to the already tangled web. What's most fascinating, though, is that the search has become more than just a hunt for gold. For many, it's a spiritual quest, a challenge against time, nature, and human limitation. The idea that one man, in an age without machines or satellites, could find what no one else ever could, still baffles modern minds. It's that paradox that keeps the legend alive. How could Jacob Waltz have stumbled upon something that remains invisible to all the technology of the 21st century? Today, people hike into the superstitions not just with shovels but with 3D scanners, magnetic resonance imaging tools, and digital overlays of ancient maps. They post their findings in real time, turning the search into a living story that continues to evolve. And yet, every expedition ends the same way, with sand in their boots, dust in their mouths, and the same unanswered question echoing through the canyons. Was the lost Dutchman-esque gold mine ever real, or has the desert been playing tricks on humanity all along? Because even now, as the world grows more connected and every inch of land is mapped and measured, the Superstition Mountains hold on to their secrets. Somewhere beneath that unforgiving stone, between myth and reality, lies something that refuses to be found. And perhaps that's exactly how Jacob Waltz intended it to be. The story of the lost Dutchman-esque gold mine stands as one of America's most enduring mysteries, a perfect storm of greed, legend, and the human obsession with the unknown. For over a century, it has pulled people into the scorching heart of the Arizona desert, whispering promises of untold riches and eternal glory. Yet, time and again, those promises dissolve into dust, swallowed by the same mountains that first birthed the tale. From Jacob Waltz's cryptic clues and his deathbed confession to the endless line of explorers who vanished without a trace, this mystery has refused to yield its truth. The desert remains a silent witness, watching, waiting, guarding whatever lies beneath its surface. And as generations pass, the legend grows stronger, reshaped by each new believer who dares to chase it. In the end, perhaps the lost Dutchman's mine isn't just a treasure buried under rock and sand. Maybe it's a mirror reflecting humanity's unrelenting hunger for discovery, for meaning, for something greater than ourselves. Because long after the last prospector has left, and the last echo fades through the canyons, the real gold may not be in the earth, but in the stories we leave behind, forever buried in the mystery of the Superstition Mountains.